Hi, everyone. We're now broadcasting. This is Adam Asness from Lingoport, and I've got my guest, Nico Martinez from Motorola with me. I'm going to just give you a little background before we get started. That's my way of letting people log in, because it always happens that I sort of need to give a couple of minutes for everybody to show up. So if you're listening to this recording, you can just move ahead 2 minutes. But uh, in any case, I wanted to just draw your attention to a couple of things. First of all, I want to mention that we've had a survey going, and that is pretty much complete. The results are in. What it is a survey of industry concerns by industry professionals, like what's on their mind for 2026. And it's very interesting. I think it asked 5 or 6 questions. It wasn't very long. And it shows a definite trend that the concerns for 2026 are not really linguistic concerns. They're more about workflow and how things get done and how what methods are going to be adopted. So there's a lot of that will be further described for you in a post, but also in a newsletter. That newsletter will go out with this recording, so you'll get it. There's nothing you have to do, but that should be out, maybe a day or two, maybe even less, than after this recording is all wrapped up. So just a heads up of what's coming. All right, I want to just this is a title screen that's actually doing a little extra work. And one of the things I want to also mention before we get started in our Q&A with Nico is that what our automation does is it really sits at the center of how software is made. And very much when software is made, it's designed first. If it's a kind of a major UI or interface change or anything like that, that's done in design, and the most common tool that's done it is Figma. And not every organization has a way to integrate their linguistic requirements into the physical design. I mean, there's Figma plugins, but then what happens is, even if you have a Figma plugin, that work is kind of thrown away because it can't be reused by the developers. So what we do is we kind of, one of the things that we do is, besides a whole lot of automation, is we unify all that. We grab context. We actually create the resource files that the developers can then just take advantage of and just grab a key and voila, as they develop. They're in multiple languages. Now, that's some of this that I'm describing has been around for a while in our product. Some of it is really quite recent, as in like a December release. So there's quite a bit that hasn't been used yet by our clients yet, but it's very exciting stuff. So we're going to talk about automation and the like with Nico, and now we're going to proceed with the main webinar here, because you're all logging in, so thank you. So Nico is one of the people that gets things done. He's an engineer by training. He has a lot of AI experience. Well, so much as anybody can have AI experience. And let's remember, when we talk about AI, that's a big umbrella. There's machine translation in there. There's LLMs in there. So when I during this conversation, when I refer to AI as in ChatGPT or one of those generative AI engines, I'm probably going to say LLM to distinguish that. But in any case, I'll do my best. But in any case, Nico, and I get to call him Nico. Nico is a senior localization software operations specialist, which means he really interfaces with a lot of groups from localization to development. Gets a lot done. I know at Motorola they have a whole lot of products onboarded. They are one of the more technical clients of ours, or technically active clients of ours. So that's always a lot of fun for my team to work with them. So, and we've had Luz from Motorola also as a guest on other webinars. So welcome, Nico. All right, I'm going to move on to our first question. And you'll notice that I kind of cheated. There's like more than one question per slide. But in any case, maybe let's get some background. Nico, can you describe how your team is structured and where localization sits in relation to design and development?
Thanks, Adam. So basically, how the team is structured today, we wear many different hats. One of those is that of project manager. So one of the project personally I'm responsible for is the firmware software that's installed on over 1 billion security camera worldwide. And so in that capacity, I interface with the developers. I work with them on GitHub during the development, giving them internationalization advice, giving them, of course, reviewing pull requests when they add new text to their software in English, and asking for our feedback as localization experts. Another role I have is more technical on the DevOps lifecycle and infrastructure of our internal tooling. So one of those main tools is Lingoport, and we also have a localization as a service portal that I built using TypeScript, React, Python, Django, this kind of tech stack. Also has AWS on the deployment side, Azure Kubernetes. So a lot in there. And so I manage all that from start to finish. So developer, deployment engineer, all that. And this portal basically allows us to do things like file conversion, answer question like, what languages we support, and have concept of languages and APIs so that you can access those programmatically. And our focus at the moment, of course, like so many teams, is around agentic AI, workflow orchestration. In the past year, I've used very briefly, I've used Cursor AI, N8N. I mean, I've used it extensively, but I'm going to be brief on that. It's an intro, and it's just being a force multiplier all around. So I'll be mentioning a few of those in response to the questions later on. But yeah, that's basically it for now.
Okay, great.
Thanks for having me.
I have to just mention, I'm here, I don't know, in the ISS space station, obviously from my background, and Nico is localizing for the moon. So
yeah, I didn't plan to have this. It's kind of weird,
right, a little fun.
but yeah.
A little fun. All right. What parts of the process are maybe not working? Where is there some potential friction?
Yeah, so I was just trying to see. Sorry, just a second. I think question. Oh, yeah, just yeah, no, all good. So in terms of what's working, when what's not working, really, in short, I would say context is always a very important issue for us. And by context, I mean translator being able to translate, to have all mainly visual context. When we talk context, it means, in my case, as I said, I'm responsible for managing the firmware that's installed on the cameras, and that users will use to set up the cameras very specifically. So it's very important that they know exactly what kind of strings, which could be very short, mean in reference to the screens they are in, and the bigger software in general, right? I mean, if we're talking about an error message or a very short tab name, so it's always a constant. I'm not going to say fight, but it's an area of friction, because currently we get context from our developers, and they're very busy. We'd rather they are not focused on that, and they are focused on writing code and translating product specifications. But it is something that we do need to be able to have efficient translation. So this is an area of constant improvement for us, definitely, and we'll talk more about that later. Yeah.
Right, right. I will mention that with our December release, so again, very recent, you can grab context that is actually mapped to the string within the localizer kind of command center. But you can grab it from Figma. You can grab it manually with a screenshot, which sometimes it's what you have to do, and that's a little bit more, personally managed. You have to get the developers to do that, which means you have to have somebody do something. With Figma, it's grabbed automatically. And lastly, there's for web apps, there's a Chrome extension that can grab it fairly automatically as well. But that's not going to help you with firmware for the web part. You really with screenshots or the Figma grab. And not everything is in Figma, so you're going to have some screenshots. Okay. All right. What kind of localization problems can designers actually see, but translators never will?
So as part of using, so we've been trying to for the past year actively roll out Figma, and we've yet to use the latest feature of the 4.x version that you've talked about to go deeper into using Figma as a source of context. But what we have been rolling out, and in partnership with designers and showing them good progress, is basically using Figma connected to a fully automated workflow on the TMS side. So we use XTM, but any TMS would do with a workflow that just does machine translation. And using the Figma plugin, we have developers that works in two ways. But one of the way, in answer to this question, really is to be able to see what string is the longest. And what string is the longest, you could translate it, machine translate in one of the 20 plus languages we support. But what we do is we do that, we send it to the MT in those 20 plus languages, and then for every string, we keep the longest string. So typically it would be German or Finnish that are very long, and we only keep those. So in return, we create using a Python script that Lingoport facilitates. We get basically a pseudo language that is then imported back to Figma as another layer, so designers can see what areas where text would overrun and very, very easily. So typically this kind of process has a lot more friction, but using the Lingoport plugin, that empty translation workflow, we basically have a workflow that's self-serve. So designers, we as a localization team help them set it up, and we provide support, but then they can run the workflow themselves. So they have the plugin set up with our help, connected to the right project in Lingoport. Then they just have to press a button, wait a couple minutes, and then they can import those longer strings in another layer, and then they see immediately where it overruns, and this is really helpful because then they can adjust. Some of the layouts would be, more in modern applications, ideally you want them dynamically adjustable, but you can't always do that. You're always constricted by how much space you have, especially on mobile device, right?
Yeah, this is really cool because if you think, the traditional way of handling this, there's two ways. You just run it through MT and hope the designer sees it in the right language, which doesn't really work because they don't probably speak that language. But then the other method, a traditional method, was pseudo localization, where you applied some math to the string and you said just multiply and fill it out with characters and maybe an open bracket on one side and a closed bracket on the other, so the designer could see the full possibility of the string. But that's, first of all, it's really ugly to look at. But
and it's an approximation as well. Like,
right,
some
it's a
string,
guess.
yeah,
Right,
it's a guess.
it's a
But it's
guess.
certainly better than nothing, and that's why
Right,
it's been what people do for decades at this stage, right?
right. But this longest string is just, I think it's the bee's knees for like it gives the designer exactly what they need to see so they can adjust. No surprises later on. All right. Do Do you think those designers really understand the downstream impact of that longest string and localization in general? And does it slow them down?
So the flip side of this is, so there's really two use cases, I think, of the Figma plugin. And at this stage, one was to find a longer string. The other is to really get a feel of the language itself. So having something that's as faithful as possible to the real deal. And so using the plugin again, but to be able to get real translation. So let's say they're adding a new feature in a new market, like they're going into perhaps a certain country in Latin America. So of course it needs to be in Spanish. Well, for the most part, it could be Portuguese, but they can use this setup to, instead of having a workflow with a longer string, just get it really machine translated in that language, or even better, connected to a TM with your past translations. With AI, things can be even better. I mean, you can, let's say it's a new language, but it's been extensively translated in others, like maybe even French and other Latin language. You could use that as context to further, it's not just old style machine translation, but you could use AI with the other languages as context to get a more faithful translation that the designer then would be able to see, get more, maybe they even speak the language, right? So some do, and being able to get a much more realistic portrait of what that would look in that language, right? Before reaching human translation. So I think understanding that how it looks is really, really important. So again, as you said, back to the pseudo translation way, like, it looks very ugly and it's not very realistic. It serves one purpose only when you use that old method, which was, do I have enough space on the screen, and do all the characters display correctly? Like, do I need to change or although at the design stage, it's more of a dev concern than a design concern, right?
Right,
So
right.
yeah, I would say again, showing them exactly, because whether you're a product manager, whether you're a designer or a developer, any people in the chain or localization, of course, the more you can walk in the shoes of the user, the more you can see and feel their pain. So I think being able to see how the product will look for them, there are many things you could do. Maybe that designer has another contact within the company or outside if it's an approved pilot, and can just send that screenshot to that Figma. Here it is in Spanish, or how does it look like? And so you will be able to get feedback that's much richer. It could be pertaining to of course, the design itself, the look and feel, but also perhaps, this feature is going to cause problem with a regulator in that country, right? Like, getting early feedback is key and saves you a lot of time downstream where code is expensive, although less so with AI, but still, the more downstream you go, the more expensive it can be, right? So it uncovers
Great,
problems early, in short.
great, great. Do you feel like that slows them down, having to consider it? Do you get pushback on that from designers?
No, because they know we're there to support them. We set them up. It's just a plugin, one button to press, literally, or a couple of clicks,
Right.
and just let it run. I mean, it's like agentic AI. You can just have a few prompts, let it do its thing. When you've got a plan, grab a cup of coffee and come back, and it's done. It's really that easy. So they're not slowed down at all. It complements their
Yeah, yeah.
work, really.
You said coffee. I already had my cup of coffee. I've been thinking I should have a second.
It's 8 a.m. here. I had to have my coffee, otherwise I would work.
Good for you. All right. Okay, next one. Let's see. Oh, I keep popping up my UI. All right. So there's always a lot. I just want to preface this that in so many customer localization sites that we work with, well, not everyone. There's this real nervousness of working with developers and pushback. So, like, how would you say it is at Motorola as you move from design to development? How do you persist in the localization mindset and performance as you actually build your products?
Yeah, so the battle is never fully won, right? You as much as possible you wanna, well, the battle. It's really the partnership, but the battle to make it as easy as possible for everyone, for yourself, for your team, and for to enable developers and designers again to do what they need to do. And we talked about the designers, and now we're talking about the developers. How can we make it easy for them, right? While still make sure that the localization constraints are met, and requirements are met. So continuous evangelization, yeah, it's a mouthful, but it basically, it's not a one-off task. In the context of continuous localization, I alluded a bit earlier in my intro to how we're working at Motorola, and I believe probably how many teams that are doing software localization work is we're plugged in. Developers work in many different pods using GitHub, and one of my projects is on GitHub, and every time they're making changes to the English string, whether it's a new string they're adding or that they're changing, it needs to go through what's called a pull request. So they basically to get the required approval for the rest of the team and ourselves. So we're fully integrated in that process where automatically, if there are changes to the localization file, we would automatically be added as a reviewer in that level, so that we get an email and we automatically, our feedback is sought for, and we need to approve it as well, right? So during that process, what we would do is provide internationalization type feedback, although we're already at localization level here, right? So they already have written the code, created the feature. We would have had, if it's a major version, a major feature, we would have had all those discussions before. But during the localization cycle, that's how we work, through pull requests, PR, how they're called, and provide that feedback. One of those things that type of feedback we would provide is, have they provided the context? Have they provided the screenshots to in their pull request? Most developers do it, and it's we strive that it's part of what's the artifact is called definition of done. It's a developer artifacts working in Agile to make sure when they write code, user stories, epics, like all those artifacts, and they consider it done. It checks marks based on not just code, like is it documented or is it tested, but does it meet localization requirements? So we do work with them to define those requirements in partnership, and one of them. So it's constantly, it's like anything, we're dealing with humans, so we want to make their life easier, and so the more they see we are trying to make their life easier and not just add extra work, the better it is for them. So I did allude that screenshot is an area of improvement for us, because currently it's easier for developers to provide a screenshot when they have the environment locally already set up. They're connected to a hardware, to a camera, which is the hurdle for us, is getting an available camera, because a lot of the text would be conditional to the camera being connected or in a separate state. And it's currently much easier for developers to reproduce this since they're building the code. They've already tried to reproduce scenarios for testing purposes. So it's easier for them to just add a requirement there and, okay, let me take a screenshot while I'm already in there, and let's just put that screenshot in there. So far it has been the easiest to do. And so, yes, it's a little extra work for them, but we are working for things like, can we get dedicated hardware so that we can locally wear the hat of the developer and just reproduce those strings, build an automated pipeline once we're able to do that, so it can be done programmatically. That's areas where we're working on. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's cool stuff. All right. We'll come back to this, but I definitely want localization professionals to be very familiar with terms like pull requests and branching and agile principles like definition of done, as well as showing your work. That's another agile principle that you actually can demonstrate what you've done, which is both are great opportunities for localization to interface with development teams. So I'm sort of tooting my own horn here. All right. So you've been, I'm going to say, LLM-driven localization systems yourself. What is one thing the LLM clearly helps with and one thing it doesn't?
maybe I'll mention very briefly a few things in each category, but I won't go too
Okay,
deep
great.
unless you want me to.
Mhm.
But in the first bucket where I clearly help quality evaluation, it's of course every localization
Mhm.
team goes through that, but it's clearly a prime, very ripe use case for AI.
Mhm.
AI is very good at checking quality, not quite fully, and depending on the use case, but for software, not good at fully generating the text yet. So we're still heavily relying on human, but we are very heavily relying on AI as a safety net to check if the quality of that human meets our requirements. Glossary, think glossary, past issues that is found during testing, and all that. So I would say that's the main answer. The main one thing I would want to take away for this question. It's we found it's very useful for other things. Information classification in general is just great at that, right? So root cause analysis, when we do linguistic testing, which can be quite, for some of the reason that I mentioned earlier, linguistic testing is quite heavy for us because it requires that we have available hardware so we can and then go into the software with the right build to be able to take screenshot that we send to testers so they have the context and they can actually go through the software. They don't have at this stage access to the full software because of those constraints, mainly hardware related, right? So some of the things we measure is around key KPI is what are those issues? Let's say a tester finds a mistranslation, but what's the real root cause, right? A lot of the time, mistranslation could be because they don't have the right context. So we don't just have, let's say, our vendors, our linguistic tester, make sure they, when they report issue, that they classify the nature of the issue, but also try to get them to provide information about the root cause. And we do use AI to backfill some of the area in the past where we didn't have this information. So root cause analysis, based on all those information, it's able to infer that based on all the data, all this context that testers provided, yes, the issue for that mistranslation, the root cause is probably lack of context, which is one of the few root causes we track very clearly. And it can go up to 25%, I would say, depending on the product line, but up to 25% of linguistic issues we have sometimes, can be attributed to lack of context. So context is a big thing for us, as you can understand. What AI doesn't help with, well, I alluded to, we don't trust it as a translator. We rely on humans, and we consider AI as a helper for human driven workflows. But we apart from that, I would say yes. I guess to add some color on, so we use AI as I mentioned, as a LLM QA check. So after the translation, we would run this check to make sure does it meet our requirements based on a RAG, vector database that's populated based on previous issues that we found and all kind of requirements that wherever they could be, on Jira, on the developer side, or Confluence for knowledge base, we feed the right information. But one thing that we found out, and it's always a constant improvement on this side, is there's no one size fits all. Some models may be good for some languages, maybe not others, right? So it's always you're always an area of research, and models are getting better every day, as we all know, and so you're never done. Yeah.
Right, right. I do want to just mention for anyone interested, we had a webinar in December where with our guest was Marina Pancheva, and she's really the AI expert spokesperson at RWS. One of the things we tested together with them was the effect of various forms of prompting on translation accuracy. So I do think in 2026 you're going to see a lot more of that. So we were, of course, prompting with context, visual context, project level context, and system level context. And I'm not going to go in what I mean with all three, but we were actually getting pretty close to human levels of accuracy. But of course, like we didn't test 21 languages. We didn't, we had both human and AI-based quality analysis being used. And one of the interesting thing is like you have humans judging what other humans translated, and whenever you put two humans together, you could have disagreement. And same goes for we're trusting an AI and its quality analysis, and what we saw it comes down to is just like humans, the AI analysis works better with context as well. So it's sort of like it doesn't matter what you use. If you have context, you're going to get better results. That's a long way of saying that. By the way, as I go to the next slide, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A Zoom interface. Definitely prefer that over the chat. All right. What resistance did you encounter? Like you've introduced a lot within your teams that the development teams and the designers that you support. So what resistance did you encounter when you introduced localization? Maybe none. Maybe I'm making a problem, but maybe you could tell us about that.
Sure. So I guess elaborating a little bit on us trying to make designers' life easier here, and using the Lingoport Figma plugin. So it's some of the resistance is you really everyone is very busy. We're all busy, right? So you don't want to add something that's half baked. And so we did our homework to make sure that we've run the process as many times as possible to feel confident that it works, right? So by process, I'm referring specifically to make sure that the plugin is connected to the right Lingoport project. The project is fully configured with a empty-only workflow. Relevant workflow with the longest string is enabled. So there's kind of two flows, right, that I mentioned earlier. One could be, I want to identify what's the longest string in my UI, so I adjust it. And the other answer is I want Spanish text or whatever that is as close as possible to what the real translation would be, so that I can send it maybe to someone who speaks English and get a better sense during design review, right? So making sure it's working was really key for us. So there was a few kinks, like everything. Every software has kinks in the matrix. So we uncovered some of the things that maybe would require, maybe there's some character. We found out early on that there were some special characters that, if used in the Figma layer, text layers would not be properly extracted and block cause an error on the extraction by the plugin. So we identify those, work with Lingoport's team. I mean, kudos to, I'm going to shout out Olivier again. He's really a great technical partner to have, has been really great with us. And it's just a great way to build software, is when you listen to how your users are using software, and it goes both ways, right? So we get to share what are our needs, but we feel they are listened to, and yeah. So anyway, yeah, shameless plug, but it is heartfelt. So I wanted to share that. So that kind of close partnership allowed to fix some of those kinks, and feel like we felt confident sharing them in the first place, and in a very uninformal way. And so it's always easy that way. So once we got those kinks either solved or fully documented, so that we can create what's called in support jargon a run book, like clear instructions. So that first, so I created that for the team, and then the team executed that process, and they had some issues at first, which is expected, because it's usually how it goes, right? You do it yourself, you think you've got it all figured out, then you got someone else to do it, and they found different ways they uncovered other issues because they did it on their project, which has different requirements, maybe different special characters perhaps, that threw in another spanner in the works. But bottom line is, we refined the process, the documentation. And then we reached a point where we felt, okay, we can get some close pilot with designers who would run it themselves, and got yeah. So I think that's what. So the resistance, I would say, is more. I try to minimize it, because I have background also as a product manager, and you want to get prototype and you get feedback as early as you can before you go too deep into coding something before validating it, right? The agile methodology and all that is meant to honor that. So I think with that approach that I just elaborated on, resistance was quite minimal because we came to them with a product that wasn't half baked. The process was working and they could see it working. It wasn't just, they click the button and error. No, it just works, right?
Right. Well, in agile terminology, you're comparing the happy path, the assumed path, to what happens in the real world when people click on things that you didn't expect. So that's great that you went through that full process. That's very cool. Did you have any metrics that tell you it's working?
Yeah, I alluded to that earlier, but just to hammer on this because it is a very important point. Lack of context really is an important KPI for us. So as I mentioned earlier, basically once we go through a round of linguistic testing, and we will have testers reporting all kind of issues with categories like mistranslation or text truncation or things like that. A lot of those could be attributed to a root cause of lack of context. So just like when you're building software as a product manager, you may know a methodology like the 5 whys. Like you always ask when you talk to someone who's saying I have a problem, you always ask the question why. You're telling me I need this feature. The first question would be why do you need this feature? And then you peel the layers of the onion until you really get to what's the real root cause. It's the same approach here. Is that all those types of issues, they're just symptoms. We want to go to the root cause, which is, okay, how do we eliminate this issue? Think root cause analysis, right? Preventative action, lack of context. So if the developers provide the right context by attaching, let's say, a screenshot to a pull request, or once we keep rolling out this Figma process so that we get more and more teams using this Figma process during design stage so that the UI expands better, accommodates more longest strings and individual language requirement. The downstream impact is there will be less issues attributed to lack of context. So we are measuring this. Every product we test, every round of testing, this is a clear metric. And so that's a measure of success right here is lack of context.
That's great. And, the title of this webinar was around shifting left. And I want to reiterate what we mean that is baking localization in as early as you can into the process of how things are made. And why, what I've seen over the years constantly is that localization issues, even just mistranslations, when they happen late, they go to Jira to die, or Confluence, whatever you're using. They go in there, and the developers have moved on. They're not going to go back and fix this thing unless you really are lucky. And so you really want to shift left, like the title of the web. You want to solve all these issues before you release. So, all right, good.
Although now with release with Jira, with things like MCP, Model Context Protocol, you can programmatically create Jira tickets. That's what I do. And you can mine Jira as a source of truth. Well, source of truth. Be careful with that. There's a lot of junk in there, but you know what I mean? Like the interaction with Jira can be less dread in the agentic AI era now, where you can automatically, but still, your point is very valid, right?
All right, good. We're kind of getting close to the end. So again, if you have a question, it's a good time to start thinking about it and putting in the Q&A interface. If a team wants to start shifting localization left tomorrow, what's the first thing they should change? And then we'll go through this kind of list.
Yeah. Understanding how software is made, really. So you don't need to be a coder, but having a high-level understanding of development cycle and knowing your customer is key, really. I would really leave it at that for this, but with perhaps a personal anecdote, like in my own story. I try to embody this because I guess I was trying to fight a symptom of the imposter, which when I was a product manager, I was feeling every day or very often, right? I know a lot of people, a lot of product managers feel that symptom. And so for me, what I felt I needed to make a change, where I needed to make a change was bridge the gap a bit and update my knowledge on how software is made so that I could communicate better with developers. Because when you're a product manager, you wear the product owner hat in a Scrum Agile methodology. That means you're essentially telling developer what you should build and why, right? That's your responsibility. And the developers are generally bringing forward the how it's going to be built. So it's always a constant communication, and knowing all those tech stack, what you can do is really game changing. And now, I mean, I've been using Cursor AI for a year. I'm one of the actually top 20% user in the company. Sorry, top 20 user in the company. I know because I had someone send an email. I was surprised, but it, what I found, and it's really game changing, is being able, now you can build things yourself, right? I mean, I know how to code. I did a boot camp for 3 months to really go deep and write full stack React, JavaScript, and Node.js backend. And in my current position, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I'm responsible for DevOps. And I didn't know anything about Kubernetes. I was only a novice in Docker. I do it at home. I have a home lab and stuff. And but now with Gemini, with Cursor AI, I mean, you've got all those assistants. You're so much faster. You can learn anything, and you can get it done. But you learn as well, because the more you chat and interact, and the more context you infuse, the more you learn as well. So I find that it really helps. Long story short, it's never been easier to try to understand. You use AI to understand the other party. You don't need to be a developer yourself and do like me, like I'm going to do 3 months full, 60 hours a week, just that. And you don't need to be a coder, but try to stay abreast and find out, at least at high level. Maybe you can even just vibe code something using Cursor, you don't need to be a coder. Again, you can learn on the spot, and as long as you start with a problem, and then over time you get those nuggets of wisdom about how it's doing its thing, how it's documenting. Like when you're telling it to write design documentation, read those documents and then learn what the code does this way as well, beside having a good documentation in your code base, which is always important. But yeah, so I would say I would leave it at that. So walking in the user's shoes, that allows you to, in my case, knowing better as a product manager, understanding better the dev team allows you to free time working more with customers, so you redirect that bandwidth instead of having conflicts, maybe because you're asking something, but the code base doesn't allow that without you refactoring it to a great extent, right? And you don't want that. Like, I think understanding a little bit allows you to really bridge that gap and go smoother. Yeah, basically.
Great answer. All right. Any quick wins or sort of hiccups that you had to handle?
I mean, too fast. I guess in my example, I mean, when you shift left, it's basically you want to empower the designer, empower the product manager. I think well, the mistake is you don't want to come. It's a balancing act between coming with, you don't want to come guns blazing and ask them to do something which is going to add to their workload, especially if you don't have a clear explanation and clear backing as to the why. And the why ultimately should translate into better market penetration or something, right? That's why we localize this, so that our users get better served, and you can go in those markets. So I think back to the use case of the Figma plugin, doing your homework and then coming to the team, but at the same time preparing the ground. While you're preparing the process, keep talking with the designer to understand their pain point and give teasers as to what's cooking, right, on your side and what's coming. So it's the mistake could be, depending on some teams that are just don't want to change their ways because they are generally it's because they're overwhelmed and overworked. You want to make sure you don't come in with asking them to do something yeah, without it being relatively easy to do, right? So like developers should be providing context, and that's true, and image screenshots in our case, but there are ways to do it and time to do it. The time to do it is when the pull request is created, because they're still in the mode of the code is still running locally for their feature.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy for them to go if they forgot, okay, because they're going to be coming back anyway to implement feedback from other team members about their code and changing a few things. So it's easy for them again to come and take that screenshot, right? If they forgot. But if the feature is branch is merged and they moved on, it's too late to come and say, hey, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, 1 month later,
Right.
can you give me that screenshot? You don't want that, right? You want to be mindful of integrating so being part of the team. So being part of that
Mm-hmm.
pull request reviewer in our case, or being knowing what are their problems, attending any calls that make sense, like pre-release or feature planning. The more you can do that, the better you can offset those pitfalls. Yeah.
Great. That's really good advice also about making it easy at the right time during their development. I think of it as like like if they're running a unit test, that's a great time to run a screenshot.
Exactly.
So all right.
Or get that screenshot feature in Playwright, right? If they're adding end-to-end Playwright automation testing,
Right.
just enable that option and save the screenshot somewhere that we can access. Yeah.
All right. Now we have no open questions, which is really weird. Guys, give me a question here. This is like pearls of wisdom from Nico. I mean, I can make up questions, but I really prefer they come from one of you. Um, does anybody have a question about Nico's background, what his department looks like, and anything like that? Otherwise, I'm going to ask those questions. All right, let's give a little time. Nico, tell us a little bit about like how did you fall into localization? Like how did that happen?
God. Well, it was over 20 years ago in 2003. I had moved from France to UK in Brighton, beautiful Brighton,
Uh-huh.
and I just started a computer science degree at university, so I needed a job, a part-time job to start paying the rent and the food and just
Uh-huh.
life, and not live of your parents' money, start to be independent. So I there was a company at the time of looking for game localization testers called Babel Media. They got acquired since by Keyword Studio.
Yeah.
And so I stayed there about 4 or 5 years actually, and part-time became more full-time. And so I did some functional testing as well as localization testing. I got sent to many different places, one of which Vancouver. I tested a game called Company of Heroes on PC, a real-time strategy game. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of fell in love with Vancouver. And many years later, made it my home. So, long story short, that's how I got in. Yeah. And I was a gamer at the time, so and like languages, so being able to be and I guess be very specific as well, very like I don't know, I have a bit of OCD as well, so being able to have this, scrutinizing something and being able to this text is overrunning, or
Uh-huh.
there is no unbreakable space before that punctuation mark, so the colon is on the next line instead of being attached to the word before, right? So all those things kind of started there, and then you log them in Jira or whatever bug tracker. But
Oh, that's good.
yeah, but working with developers was the highlight for me. So when I did that mission for Company of Heroes for Relic Entertainment, and they send you work directly with developers. Not only you travel, but you get to see and shorter cycles. Yeah, a lot of overtime, so it pays well. You paid by the hour. So yeah,
Nice,
um,
nice,
yeah.
nice. I always like people's origin stories. Along those lines, one of the earliest projects Lingoport ever got was internationalizing, or I should say, double byte enabling a product that's like, it's not around anymore. It was called Kid Pix, but it was like super popular for kids, you know, and we had to make that work in Chinese. And really bad was one of the requirements that it worked in Chinese on, I want to say, either a Windows 95 or Windows 98 machine, which was really not equipped for Unicode. So it was really a problematic project, but it was successful. But like these are your battle scars, you know.
Oh yeah, don't
All
tell
right.
me about encoding. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right, right. All right. Well, I'm going to call it good. I'm sorry we don't have any questions from the audience for you. Usually we have a lot, but once in a while this happens, and I really prefer not to make up fake questions. So I'm going to leave it at that. Real pearls of wisdom, Nico. Really appreciate your help here. This was just great.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, and everybody, you'll receive the recording automatically. There's nothing you have to do, and I mentioned the newsletter as well. Thank you very much for your time and the prep that went into this also when we sent you the questions. Take care.
Cool. Thank you.
Talk to you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.